So I would like to call the July meeting of the Narberth Planning Commission to order. It's 7:02 p.m. on Monday, July 6th at Borough Hall. I'll take attendance briefly. I am Adam Fromm, the chair of the Planning Commission. Um, Ralph,
Fishwell here.
Jennifer, absent.
I'm here.
Okay. She's on Jennifer's online.
Yes, I'm here.
Todd,
I am online. Welcome, everyone.
Heidi here. Aaron is absent, and David is our alternate is here. Oh, and Brian Kinslow is absent. Right, so I think we have a quorum. David will be acting as a member tonight. Our agenda includes the following items. Item 1 is announcements and updates from the chair and the Montgomery County Planning Commission staff. Item 2 is review and approval of the June meeting minutes were distributed via email. Item 3 is discussion of a tentative sketch plan for 714 Montgomery Avenue. That's the property behind the Price House. Item 4 is public comment. And then item 5 is we will take a motion to adjourn. For the chair's update, 4th of July was another one of the books. It was a fantastic fireworks show. Really appreciate all the people that make that happen. And I think we, managed to do that in spite of the challenging weather conditions over the weekend. So it was a nice event for the nation's honor the nation's founding 250 years ago. Last week, Aaron Graves, a member of the Planning Commission, gave a presentation. I believe I wasn't at the meeting and I haven't seen the presentation tape, but gave a presentation to the Borough Council work session on the economics of multifamily housing, what makes projects feasible or infeasible financially, and how rents may or may not, contribute to having a project that can be financed essentially, in the context of what would it take to get apartments to be affordable in new buildings. So that was a presentation last week, and those are the only updates that I have. Questions? Otherwise, I'll pass it to Adam Shantz with the Planning Commission.
Yeah, so the main update I have to give you is just on the recodification. I know we've been going over this for a long time now, but we're nearing the finish line, which is wonderful. So Todd and myself had met with Councilperson Gaudini as well as Councilperson Spear. And we kind of reviewed the zoning districts, wanted to put them into tables separating out the uses from uses and building types. So I've done that, submitted it to the solicitor as well as Maggie. I've received some feedback from Maggie today, going to incorporate that. And then I'm resubmitting it to her and she'll submit it to council for their review. The next council meeting. So we're coming to the finish line, which is great there. And that's really the main update that I have to share.
Questions? Yeah. Okay, at this time too, if there's normally we cancel our August Planning Commission meeting for the summer holidays. There's currently nothing on the agenda for that meeting. So do any members object to canceling the August meeting? All right, so we'll recommend to the Borough Council that we cancel the August Planning Commission meeting for next month. And then we'll pick it up again in September is the schedule. Okay, item 2 is the June meeting minutes, which were distributed by email. Did anyone not receive the minutes? Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes? Okay, so as a reminder, last month, we discussed recommendations for how to allow more active uses in the zoning code, particularly for downtown or the commercial areas. And then spacing requirement for Haverford Avenue, so that to maintain a diversity of business types on Haverford Avenue. All right, well, can we entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June? Make a motion to approve. Okay. There's a motion made and seconded to approve the June meeting minutes. All members in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, minutes were unanimously approved for the June 1st meeting. Item 3 is a presentation and discussion of a tentative sketch plan for 714 Montgomery Avenue. So a tentative sketch plan is the first part of a development application. It's not, there's no vote, as I understand it, that we are making a recommendation to anyone. We simply have an opportunity to provide our feedback to the property developer and also discuss the findings of the borough engineer and the zoning officer with regards to this submittal. So do we have someone representing the development proposal? Can you introduce yourself and we'll let you have the floor?
Is it okay if I sit here, or should I?
We can move as close as you can,
Sure.
whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brandon Savage. There we go.
Hello. Hi.
Um,
This is Brazil.
Bar is the architect, so I really didn't want to.
Thank you.
Let me just happen to write it down and I'll see.
Do you have, so what we can do is we have this via email as well.
Yeah.
And if you have, if we can put the material on the screen.
You want some of these next to you as well, or just the screen is good?
Just so that anybody who wants to.
them, you can.
Yeah. Yes.
If you find enough, I see have quite a few. I know you need one. Yeah. We can look at the drawings on the screen and then anyone who needs to vote, there's a bunch of them, and they'll be part of the video record of the meeting.
Good evening again, everybody. My name is Brandon Savrin. I'm a zoning and land use attorney with the firm Dilworth Paxson here in Philadelphia. We have Bar Levy of Sandbar Design, who is the architect that prepared the plans in front of you, and I'm really going to let him do the presentation. Unfortunately, the other member of our team, who I believe lives in Lower Merion, if I'm not mistaken, was caught in a flight cancellation due to the storms. So he is on the Zoom. He's Nate, who I saw his tile.
Hi.
Hi, Nate. But because Nate is on the virtual format, we're going to let Bar really take the pen here and any questions you have after that, Nate and I will participate as needed.
Yeah, excuse me, is Nate the owner or?
Nate is not the owner, so the owner is Michael Friedman.
Oh, okay.
Michael, to be fully transparent, is sort of taking a passive role here. He has brought on Nate as the developer, and Nate, working with Michael, selected by Bar and I to fill out the team. Michael has, for some length of time, entertained the possibility of selling his property, and it includes the Price House and the space behind it. To this point, he's not found any satisfactory buyers. So he's going to proceed with this process, starting with this tentative sketch plan. May see it through with us. If someone comes along who he ends up going under contract to, our hope is that Bar would stay on with that person. But that's sort of the state of play at the moment. Bar?
Yeah.
Introduce yourself and your
Bar Levy from Sandor Design, I got Ellen here, and also lives, capital from here, then Wayne. And we have Elizabeth, project manager, project architect, if this becomes a project really, which is, it's a lot about this conversation that we're having today. So it's 714 Montgomery. Montgomery is the commercial corridor, the street to be on, in all of this stretch. Facing Montgomery, we have an existing beautiful commercial space to remain commercial. It's an historical building, which we will maintain as part of this kind of overall development. Maintaining the entire structure besides a portion in the rear that was added later in the days. The idea is to demolish that portion. However, use the lovely materiality on a portion of that demolished area to become part of the new. So really taking a portion of the existing that doesn't really function and doesn't have nice attributes, it doesn't have enough ceiling height and such, and taking that materiality and applying it to the new structure up front to tie the two architectures together. We're looking at another street access for Meeting House Lane. So we really have a property that is pretty unique. It faces two pedestrian and car streets, Montgomery and Meeting House Lane. That makes a very unique lot line kind of geometry. And I think that geometry is what brings the conversation to where we are today. Where do we shift from? What do we respect? Which are our neighbors? How do we relate to our neighbors? And based on those conversations, we started to pull and push those lines of the building envelope. And we had conversation, with you guys, you received some comments, and we kind of brought what we have in front of you to the table. So I think to really grasp the scale and the architecture of what we're doing, the video would be just the easiest thing. We've done a quick animation showing the kind of the 3D view of that proposed structure, and how does it work with the existing and the street as a whole. So it is facing Meeting House Lane. So the video is taken from Meeting House Lane as if you were kind of traveling along the street, and you could see the architecture kind of appears from the street view. So that's the person experience, right? That's what we suggest. We suggest a low scale residential of 4 stories, maintaining some of the earthy materials of the existing building, tying it into the new structure, both from the main kind of, in the center of the space, there's going to be a main kind of, it suggested it's an atrium, it is not. It's developed, it's broken down into different spaces, but it maintains the same materiality and tonnage. And that's basically the view from Meeting House Lane. That's what you would see. We're not there fully, obviously, with this design. It's just a sketch, we're thinking bricks and stones. Sometimes brick and stones clash. So that's a conversation for definitely thinking about the ins and outs. But that's basically it. We'll have the facade broken down. You see on Meeting Lane, Meeting House Lane, we're breaking it down with some balconies and porches that come in and out. So we don't have a monotony, kind of a wall, monotonic wall that stretches the whole face of Meeting House Lane. But what you're looking at here is a residential building. It's a residential multi-building of 20 units. The first floor is dedicated for parking, back of house, elevator lobby and overall lobby, package room, mail room, all of the stuff you would need in order to maintain a clean multi-family building. So that would be the first floor. The second floor would be 7 units, 7 residential units with a green courtyard, so a green roof on the bottom in the center of that space, which is kind of would have a nice hallway surrounding all the units, but on the other side of the hallway, instead of what you would see in most multifamilies, it's not just a corridor, door to one unit, door to another. This is very unique when you have door to your unit, but then on the other side you have this nice courtyard, kind of bringing some light in. But there are 7 residential units per floor on the first, on the second and third, and then on the fourth floor where we have the residence in, we have 6 units, and that brings us to the 20. We got 18 parking spaces, utilizing the existing location of the car cut on Mickey Lane, and kind of allowing the natural circulation, the existing circulation to kind of come in. We recommended to enlarge it to a 22 from 18. We believe that's a very, very sophisticated kind of suggestion, knowing the two-way street with today's car widths. Some cars, especially in the suburbs, like to be very big and wide. So that would certainly would work nicely. And we were suggested to enlarge our what we previously presented as our front greenery patch or greenery buffer between that street and the structure. And, you know, showing, can you move into the watercolor renderings? Showing that threshold from the street into the structure with that amount of greenery and the stretch of it, it really ties nicely. You know, this is a sketch again. This is what we're anticipating at this point. It will evolve, no doubt. But that buffer, that green buffer with the stone wall behind it, and now it comes together into a residential entrance. It's elegant, you know, it's elegant, and it's matching the vernacular. There's so much green stretches around us, and we were trying to kind of tie into that. Yeah, so in that upper left, I think that's a good understanding of the relationship between the two buildings. That's how you see it from within our lane. You see the existing building on the right to maintain. That entire portion will be maintained. The portion to be demolished is really behind that structure, and it's a one-story structure. That was added in not as part of the original. We looked at sun pad diagrams, and we look at how the sun kind of works with the structure. We don't believe this building will cast too many shadows on anybody who lives close, due to the setbacks and due to the relationship between this building and the neighboring buildings. I have in this part of the presentation, you could go through a little bit. You could see I got some sections showing the heights, you know, showing that it's not too high per floor. We're not going any floor, is not in the 12 feet per floor, 11 feet. It's just simple multi-family residential to allow for nice units. 2 of the units will be under the 500 square feet threshold per the zoning to kind of allow the diversity of the units and allow the different typology. We have a nice diverse unit. We have 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, and the efficient units under the 500 square feet. But yeah, so I think, you know, if you could go through the rest of the.
Is there a picture like with the house next to it on the other side?
I don't think so. Can we go?
Which is really close to this house, but very, very close.
This house here, yeah.
Right.
This house here. How far is the
Very close.
So, because when I'm imagining the street, yeah. So when I'm looking at those, right, the picture is zooming to the center picture. Right. Yeah. So we have set back the structure 12 feet on the first floor. So the first, second, third will be 12 feet from our property line. And do you mind if I stand and point it out? Yeah. So it'll be easier here. So if this is our property, there is the driveway and then the house, and with the greenery here, we took that line and pushed it 12 feet inwards towards the site or towards our property line. And then on the 4th floor, so on the highest floor, if you see here, there is an additional 5.5, I believe, 5.6 setback. Yeah. So it will be the 12 plus that additional setback on the higher floor.
It'd be nice to see a picture. I mean,
Yes,
a picture
I get it.
with that house there.
Mm-hmm, I get it. Yeah, it should have been there. You know, when we look at those, when we went to the site and took those pictures with the perspective of the camera, it didn't fit. But sometimes you could widen it nicely to show it. Yeah. Yeah, we could send it, we could think yeah, the question, I think, and we had conversation and we are very aware of of some of the concerns and, we did our best to reply to those concerns. We got very good suggestions that we enjoyed applying to the architecture, we really celebrate our building.
Sorry, suggestions from whom?
Yeah, from whom, not never on the street.
So when you submit a sketch, you get a response from the township, yes, so it's basically a very code. We got something from Kevin that was very nice, and from Panoni, I believe.
And the county, and I believe Mr. Friedman, and this is going back several years now, I think submitted something, I don't know if it came before the commission in person like this, but that was sort of the baseline off of which our initial sketch, and this is, as Barb mentioned, not our true initial sketch. We submitted one a couple of months ago and decided, and I apologize if that was problematic for anyone's schedules here. We decided based on the feedback from Panoni and your zoning officer and the county not to move forward with that sketch and produce this instead. So this is sort of.
This cannot be, though, with the input of anybody living on the street. That is a gigantic building on a residential street filled with families. That totally changes the entire feel of the street.
So respectfully, just we have to run the meeting following the rules of order, so only commissioners are allowed to ask questions at this stage. We have public comment as well, and after the presentation and the discussion, I think we'll have some opportunity for some public comment as well, but just to make sure we keep a structured meeting, if we need to keep it to just commissioner at this point. I also like to so what I'm suggesting we would do is have, run through the developer's presentation, and then I'd like to have the borough zoning officer go through the points of review from the review letter. That's the main review letter. There's also a review letter from the borough engineer and I think from the county, perhaps.
From the initial sketch, yeah.
Okay, so there's other review letters, but the main, perhaps the most important one is the zoning review. There are some open questions in that, and so we can see if there's a response to those questions. Then we can poll the commissioners for feedback on the proposal, and then potentially have the public comment as well. There's always public comment at the end, but whether we want to bring some of that public comment into the main meeting. So that's the way I think we can run the discussion, hopefully in a timely manner. So is there more to your presentation?
No, that's it, that's it.
All right, so if there's no more to the presentation, and are these drawings available on the borough website? Correct?
They are.
Yeah. So they're available to download from the borough website. I'd like to have the borough zoning officer walk through the zoning review letter, please.
Sure. So I'll just go through point by point. I'll read right off my letter and then you can address. During the initial sketch, we had a Zoom meeting with their team and we kind of ironed out some of the issues. And then the resubmission came in and some of my issues were eliminated and a couple of new ones have come up. So this is actually the first time I'm hearing a response as well. It looks like I have 12 comments. I don't expect all these to be addressed. Some of these are more or less part of the tentative sketch process where the applicant's not required to provide a certain level of detail. And therefore, I'm just noting that that's something to consider moving forward. Several of them have to do with parking, which I know is a big point of contention for both residents and commissioners. Item 1, identifying the proposed use of the existing two-story structure that is the Price House. I know when you don't necessarily have the plans approved, you don't know what your tenant's going to look like. You don't know, without having the proposed building next door, what type of tenants you will be having. But the biggest point for me is that the tenant drives the number of parking spaces, and therefore, without that proposed use, I'm not able to calculate parking for the site. So you'll see a lot of my comments actually have to do with parking in general. So whether or not you want to make any comment on that, commissioners, or that's something just to keep in the back of your mind. Basically, if we were to keep the existing two-story Price House as business and professional offices, and the existing square footage of that space, plus the number of units in the residential, they would have enough parking. However, if you were to do something like a dental office where parking is based on the number of exam rooms, the number of parking spaces required changes, and that might not be compliant. So that's just something to keep in mind moving forward. Would anyone like to comment on number one?
Let's go through them all.
Okay. One point that was actually similar to a comment I had in the first review is, sheet 001, the cover sheet for kind of the overall site plan, is that the front yard setback shall be measured from the property line to the front facade of the building. And it looks like they measured it from the, it's kind of hard to tell. It looks like the dimension may be accurate on Z01, but it might need to be shifted backward. So it's from the property line to the front facade and does not, it excludes the balconies. Not sure how you measure that.
And so when you're talking about the primary frontage, talking about Montgomery,
It's actually, so you have two, each individual building, when you have two buildings,
got it.
has its own.
Yeah, so just to point it out here, it will be, what you're looking for is from the closest point here to the closest point of the building.
Can you do it on the screen?
Emily,
Yeah.
can you pull up the site plan, please?
So, yeah, I could provide it, it's,
And it's gonna be excluding the right of way. So in most 5B buildings, it's gonna be from the,
so that blue dimension,
right here, probably here to here is realistically the dimension you're looking for.
Oh, so you-
I'm sorry, is this the sidewalk?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, from here to here. So that, you kind of moved it up, I don't know if you need to shift that down. Is that the dimension?
no, the 7.4 is just the greenery stretch, what we're showing there, you're talking about that secondary setback, yeah, to break the facade, so it's not more than 50%. That's, I think, was 6 foot.
Right,
Yeah.
but it has to do with, this has to do with the front setback of the building, period. The
Uh-huh.
6-foot setback for establishing frontage building is a little bit different. So you go from the sidewalk to the
Yes,
front of the building.
so that 3010 goes from the property line directly to that frontage, that's not it, so
All we're gonna do is exclude the right of way, and that building needs to be from 3'6" to 9'6".
from 3.6 to 9.
I'm sorry, so just for my clarification, what is the minimum setback on Meeting House Lane for the building?
It's based on the zoning district, not the street. So
Yeah.
it's in the 5A, so even the price house or anything new is based on the street that it
Yeah,
comes.
yeah.
So it's 3'6" minimum, 9'6" maximum.
Okay, so they have to be between 3'6" and 9 feet from the property line on the street.
Correct.
Are they compliant with this?
Just can't tell based on the information they have.
Yeah, what's the property line on that? I'm confused about that dotted line in the middle of the street.
Yeah, so that, a lot of commercial properties extend out to maybe the middle of the street. Then you have to exclude the right of way.
Have you surveyed do you have a survey of the property?
We received the survey,
I mean, it looks like it's more than 4 feet, but if that dashed line behind the sidewalk is the property line. All right, so
Just something to verify, and then just to let you know, in the back of our zoning code, we have our street designs, and that'll give you the cartway right away width. So you can just, from that 30 feet, 10 inches and change, we can just exclude half the cartway if it's to the center line, and you'll get your setback.
Mhm.
Okay. Item number 3 is regards to conditional use and the parameters that come along with that. So I think that's just a note to keep in the back of your mind. I'm sure your clients are aware that they need to go through the conditional use process. That's basically how you get the additional stories, that has the setbacks on the upper stories. That is part of my question, though. You can probably work with down the line. You need a setback 1 foot for every 2 feet that you go up. And I don't see any dimensions for that building and how far that setback is.
So for 4th floor, so above the 3rd floor, for every setback, you want, above the 35
Oh,
on.
35
Yeah,
feet.
so we
that is.
compliant, and then does it need to be the 100% of the facade of that frontage, or, because we did do it all over, just not for the 100%, it's 100% on the 2 sides, where we have the residential.
Correct.
Yeah, but in the front and rear, we did these balconies and then set it back, so it's more than 50%, but if it's the 100, yeah.
So, yeah, so it has to be 100% of the building frontage above 35 feet, right? So again, you just need, I see you have a 5-foot dimension up at the top of Z01, the very top of the building. So I'm assuming that's kind of the balconies around, and then 6 foot at the front. So I just need to know, is that 10 foot high to allow that 5 foot? Okay, that would be compliant in that case. But I think the bigger issue is realistically your balconies need to be excluded from your calculation for frontage build out.
So I'm sorry, so balconies don't count as the building front?
There's kind of exceptions that you can play with. It's,
I mean, but you couldn't have balconies if you were only 5 foot off the sidewalk, then, right, they would do it right up against the side, like, there'd be no buffer.
there's certain allowances, or exceptions for how far a balcony can encroach a front yard setback. The idea is that I believe you're using the balconies to comply with frontage build out and break up your facade. But then it looks like you may be calculating it to use the front yard
See the
setback.
elevation for a second. So I would, you could see it that way. We don't think about it that way. It's more of a built feature. Architecturally, it has columns. It's, it's not just a sticking out balcony.
Right.
It's part of the overall mess. Enclosing it with sunroom would be just too much
Right.
on the messing. So I think the balcony is actually doing, it does both, break, the zoning requirement of the continuous facade, but it's also a messing feature to the architecture. If you zoom into the bottom right, I think you would see it quite nicely there. Yeah, so the balconies are, it's a continuous, both vertical and horizontal lines that kind of repeats besides the top floor where we did that.
So I think that you're using, do you mind going to, the overhead site view that kind of shows the front facade, if there's anything that does that? Long meeting house. So realistically, setback more than 6 feet from these brick walls here, setback backwards are excluded from the frontage build out calculation. I think the way you're receiving that is, this is all setback more than 6 feet from this point, is that correct?
Yeah.
That's not the case. That 6 foot starts to break one off the edge of the balcony. So your setback is measured to the front facade of the wall, not like a structure. So this is a structure by our definition, but it's not an occupiable space. So all porches, stoops, balconies, all that is excluded.
From the set, they don't, right,
They're excluded from the setback.
from the
There's
facade.
allowed to be exceptions and encroachments into the front setback. But your front yard setbacks don't to this wall, and therefore anything beyond that 6 feet is to be included. So right now, I think you're trying to exclude this one, correct? From your frontage build out?
No, that, I mean, it's setback, but not setback 6 feet to break yeah. I'm not trying to, what I was trying to do is to have a variation with the balconies of in and outs. If the balcony is enclosed on the one floor at the bottom, create a porch, what does it do then in terms of the setback? I want to create a variation. I think the variation and that is crucial for the street, and.
It's a requirement. The way that you manipulate that is actually pretty specific in the code, how you break up those lines to monotony of that front facade. I think basically all these balconies are kind of like bonuses. All your measurements, they're kind of excluded from any measurements you're performing. So that's kind of where we need to be. And I think that might be unclear from our person. And that kind of brings in a second point that I think bring up later regarding this kind of is a courtyard. By definition, it's recessed, and that's kind of how our code defines a courtyard, but the dimensions of that have to be certain depths depending on the height, or widths depending on the height. And that's a comment I had down the line. So I think a lot of your front facade is going to get pushed and pulled.
So Kevin, are you saying that brick wall that we're seeing behind the main facade can't go up the full 45 feet either?
Correct.
It has to be set back at the top level.
Floor will,
That fourth floor has to be set back,
correct, equal to what's happening on the
similar to the side.
sides, correct.
Okay.
So that's kind of 3A on my letter.
The balconies don't count as the facade.
Correct.
And the goal is so that you don't read this massive facade from meeting house.
So 3A, are you comfortable with 3A? We can respond.
Yeah, no, that, I would read, your comment, I would digest and just reply. I get it, and I get the 35 feet and back, yeah.
I think a lot of the front facades are going to just change because of the zoning requirements, unless you feel otherwise. Item 4 is a second comment, just a different code section related to apartment buildings requiring conditional use, which we're going to go through no matter what. This item number 5 is something that as you were mentioning, the original tentative sketch in 2022 did end up resulting in some code changes. But this one, did not change, and I don't know if the building changed. It's pretty consistent with my original 2022 letter in regards to a rear yard setback for this proposed structure. So although it is a 5-sided lot, basically the rear lot is always opposite of the front lot line. In this case, it's the one along Meeting House Lane. So on sheet Z01, like, you just want to scroll up to the left a little bit, I think. Sorry, Z01, you're on Z02.
Over here.
You're on Z02, aren't
Go to the first drawing right there.
you? Up and a little bit more up. Yeah, right there. And then if you don't mind zooming in the top left corner of the proposed building. So they've highlighted a 5-foot setback. And I think one of the original plans actually identified 4.36 feet. But regardless, that side of the property is actually where the required rear lot line and rear yard setback need to be. And our code requires 25 feet. So when you have multiple principal buildings in the 5B district, each building kind of acts on its own, and they each need their own side front rear setbacks. In this case, that 5 feet actually is required to be 25 feet. I'm sure you're aware that's pretty significant.
Kevin, one question I had with that is that, so you're saying it's 25 feet where the Meeting House Lane is the street and the rear is opposite it, but I think the way Todd's explained to me, I think it was intended that the 25 feet be from the rear from the Montgomery Avenue street.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a code section added specifically as part of the original tentative sketch in 2022, but there is a new section that basically says in the 5B district where you have multiple principal buildings, each building needs to have its own dimensional setbacks. Paraphrasing, I can pull it up for you. That maybe changed why this.
You're saying like there's a house next door on the left of the drawing,
Correct.
right? And there was a question earlier, like as opposed to, which lot line should have the 25-foot setback?
So it's, as part of the original discussion in 22, actually, if we're looking at this building from Meeting House Lane, okay, kind of looking towards Montgomery Avenue on a diagonal, you're looking at the house to the left, one of the residents, that first residential property, that actually is the side yard, and that's only required to be 5 feet. As part of the original discussions.
Yeah, is
they
there
made
any,
that 12.
is there any way to characterize that lot line as the 25-foot setback and the other one as the, what did you say a side yard has to be?
It was only required to be 5 feet next to that residential property. So the original plan, I think, is Mike had kind of offered to do was make that 12 feet to kind of provide additional setback from that residential property. That's not a required 12 foot. That's actually only required 5 feet.
All right, so you're saying by zoning that lot line is the side yard,
Yeah.
but they need 25-foot rear yard.
Which is where that 5-foot blue setback text is written right now.
So does that apply just to the new structure? Because if when I read it, we have Montgomery, which is primary frontage, the
Right.
biggest corridor. And I'm looking at the side, at a line that is abutting that, meaning you're defining the rear to adjacent to the front of Montgomery. So just to the new structure, just to the new structure, because of the orientation that we chose for it, then it makes the rear. We have, this is the primary frontage on Montgomery, yeah, and we have a lot line that abuts and connects to a geometrical line, so I'm not considering Montgomery in this instance for the setback as my primary frontage. Yeah, for that structure it would be Meeting House Lane.
Right.
Got it. Okay, so it's very crucial for us to really understand how much setback for each line, so we don't come back here with any mistakes anymore. We just go to the point. So that becomes a side yard. Yeah,
On the proposed building.
on just the proposed building. Front would be here, then that's somewhat another side to this guy, just in a diagonal.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's not
As I recall, several years ago, the original sketch submitted actually attached the new building to the old building. And therefore, rear lot line was from the Montgomery Avenue direction. Does that?
Yeah, so there was original corridor, whether it was heated or not, heated and cooled, so there was only one building, so therefore you only had one rear yard, which is kind of opposite of. I really got to pick whether it was actually Meeting House Lane or the lot line adjacent to the residential property. Now you have two buildings facing different streets, and therefore you have two different front yards depending on the building, different side yards, different rear yards, depending on which building we're talking about.
There's definitely a 25-foot setback somewhere required. So the way, what Kevin's saying is that the way this is drawn, it's required along the 219-foot long property line. And the way it was required in the original submittal several years ago was along the shorter lot line perpendicular to Meeting House Lane.
Yeah, the 125, right, because it was attached.
125.
But 5 feet is not 25 feet, so. The parking can be in that setback, is that correct?
That actually comes up later, to my knowledge. This kind of goes hand in hand with what you were just talking about. The maximum allowable frontage build out along Meeting House Lane shall be 50%, in accordance with table 4. So basically you have 102 feet 6 inches, taking the measurement as defined, to what should be included in the front yard setback, in the front yard from the side. I believe, short and like this, so you're identifying 102.5 feet. Because this portion is not set back at least 6 feet, and balconies are excluded as part of that, it's that whole dimension. The brick to your brick, that front facade is included as your front end build out, and then you divide it by the street. So I'm dividing here by here, because you don't meet the exception for setting it back 6 feet. If you do kind of extract the building inward, that can be excluded from that calculation.
Yeah, so with that nuance of the 9.5 max of setback, there is high potential, and I'm far away from the dimensions right now, that the brick building, the brick line comes forward, right? And then the recess goes backward, which will result in a more massive view from,
Right.
yeah.
So I was thinking, that if it works from a front setback between that 3 feet 6 and 9 feet 6, you might be able to extend these two walls, keep that as is, and then that portion will be excluded from the calculation, yes. If these portions that are now currently permitted, right, came forward, you still meant front yard setback?
Yeah.
Yes, that portion is 21 feet to be excluded, and then you'd probably be left with whatever that is, 81 feet over 142, I don't know.
It's just so I can understand, are you saying that basically just make the recess deeper?
No, he's
I
saying
don't know.
push the front wall.
Either or, honestly, either or. As long as you-
The front wall just has to be no further than 9 feet. Is it further than 9 feet now?
Yeah. Yeah, what's the dimension of that front wall now from the setback?
It's 30 feet 10 inches from the property line. We'll have to get in and do the plus minus with the nuance of removing the right of way.
Yeah, that's
those
the
numbers.
thing. Do you know what that right of way is?
I'm gonna pull up.
Yeah. 'Cause
I mean, it really goes down to the rear line. Like if to just be honest and transparent here, it comes down to that. It comes down to chopping 5 to 25 feet. It's a different story while not really respecting the neighbors on the left, which we really tried with the 12 feet from there and the green buffer, chopping it in those two directions. I'd love to bring it to the drawing board, but just knowing what the developer is expecting, I don't know, if it's viable, but it's just trying to respond to the geometry you're looking for. It's pretty tough. It would be pretty tough to get something in there.
So table 11 are the street dimension standards. The right of way for the 300 block of Meeting House is 50 feet, so obviously half of that is 25. So I believe, according to your plan, you're taking 25 from 30 feet 10 inches. I think your front yard setback should be 5 feet 10 inches. You would be compliant now. You just need to provide that dimension, and that's the number you can play with. So either pull the wall forward, push it back, which I don't know why you do that.
Yeah.
And it would be
I'm sorry, but you are losing me. Just like what do they need to do to be compliant?
They're all kind of playing off of each other, which is why it is getting confusing. If this, I'm kind of doing the work for him now. If the right of way is 25 feet for half, his front yard setback is 5 feet 10 inches change right now.
the front yard setback is in the drawing that, or you're saying that it needs to be 5 feet 10 inches?
If he takes that measurement properly by excluding, this is the dimension he provided, but he's including the right of way dimension. Half of the right of way of meeting house is 25 feet. So you're taking 25 feet right off of that.
Right,
So you're gonna be left with 5 feet 10 inches.
that's to the
To the
balcony
side.
plus 6
Wherever the
feet.
No.
right of way is.
Oh, is that to
That's
the
wherever the right
balcony?
of way is.
It's to the,
That's to the balcony.
that's to the balcony line, the 30 feet 10 inches. And then it's another 6 feet to the facade.
Yeah.
But
Right.
she actually can put that-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's 11
So,
feet 10
so in
inches.
theory, we could bring the whole mass forward, which is architecturally not fun for the street. Which would help with the 25 feet setback.
Well, I mean, just
But by
look,
6
I don't wanna, I wanna keep moving here, but the balconies are a choice, there could potentially be other choices for the facade design, instead of a balcony.
Yes.
To, anyway, it's just what the zoning says.
Yeah, I think my suggestion to kind of be compliant is remove any sort of balconies other than the setback of the fourth floor and start there to get your building kind of placement completely ironed out. Make sure your frontage build out width is accurate, make sure your building setback is accurate, compliant, then kind of go from there with what you want to extend in further out.
Or like, because if the setback is not compliant, it could be a variance at that point.
Right. Yeah.
If you
Basically,
want to set back further from the street,
right.
for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So the requirements, item number 7 on my letter is that requirements are 500, 502F. This has to do with the building type, which is a apartment building. That just has to do with fenestration, window openings to wall ratios. We usually don't see that until the preliminary final step, which is a comment that obviously I haven't reviewed them, and the only reason I made that comment is because they provided elevations. And obviously, just there's not enough information on the elevations that I saw to verify that requirement. Getting back to kind of the front facade in general, the dimensional requirements for a courtyard, which is you need to provide a certain type of frontage along meeting house, regardless of what you do. You can do that for balconies, porches, stoops, courtyards. They all have specific dimensional requirements. That proposal is a courtyard by definition, but that courtyard just doesn't meet the dimensional requirements that we have set forth in the section that I mentioned.
So what would be a compliant courtyard?
I think it is, the width has to be half of the height, if I remember correctly,
The height to the building?
wherever the courtyard ends. The horizontal height of the courtyard, so it extends the entire height of the building, which is it 35 feet? Or 40? So I think your courtyard.
Was it to the 4th floor or the 3rd floor?
So it has to be to the third. Fourth, floor to be set back.
Well, so it's either 17 and a half feet deep, you're saying? Or wide?
On the floor. I don't want to say it's a moot point, but again, this whole facade and kind of the measurements and dimensions of.
So is just so I understand this, is the breaking up they have to break up, they can only have 55% of the lot line as facade, is that what you said?
50%.
50%. But if they set back a portion of the facade, that part doesn't count?
Right. If it's excluded more than 6 feet from that primary frontage line, it's excluded based on our definitions.
So they have to set back 6 feet to count, to not count in the length of the building.
Frontage build out, correct.
And does it have to be a courtyard if they set back? I mean, can they just set the entrance back 6 feet?
Depending on the design of the building, yeah, you can, but if they're what they're proposing is creating a courtyard. There's different ways to do that, but they're creating a courtyard. We typically see the residential properties where I like to think along like the Dudley Avenue corridor where kind of the addition is set back 6 feet from the front facade of the existing house, and that the proposed addition is then excluded from the facade area calculations. It'd be the same thing here, but now that they have something on both sides of that empty space,
Why is it, I guess I'm not seeing where the front entrance you're calling a courtyard? Like,
This little tiny, because again, balconies are excluded, this
Yeah.
tiny setback here.
yeah,
Creates a courtyard.
why is that called a courtyard?
How it's defined,
So any setback from the main facade becomes a courtyard.
where you have structures on both sides of it.
No,
This structure for the balconies.
no.
It's a small, there's a small
It's,
extra setback for that stone wall to create that. So to
So,
make that
let-
compliance,
let
it
me-
would be 6
yeah, so like, if you were to invert, and this is fascinating to me, I'm not sure that it's what is intended by the zoning, but if you were to invert it so that the lobby entrance were further forward and the rest of the building were set back, that would not be a courtyard condition.
Right.
And it would be compliant because it would be less than 50% of the lot line.
let's
So it
say,
has to be 6 foot.
It's 6 foot, it should modulate the facade by 6 feet.
so say this was here, existing, and that the front.
But you could tuck your balconies into that 6 feet.
And you pulled this building back 6 feet, all these portions would be excluded.
Yeah, so I mean, right, and then that 6 foot, the balconies wouldn't count if they were, so you sort of, if you flipped the
Yeah.
facade design.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a good
We would-
idea,
we would
I'm just saying
certainly-
like, it sounds like that's
Yeah.
to meet the zoning numbers.
Yeah, we could certainly, I could see many ways to bring the facade and to the zoning code compliance. Definitely, there's many ways to go about it, and it would still work, and it will not affect the, I think the building that much, it would still look kind of within the same, language.
Because otherwise you're saying, Kevin, that like a courtyard dimensions is, it's.
So the ratio of the height of the highest even framing of the courtyard to the widest linear measure of the courtyard, so height to width can be no greater than 2 to 1.
So if the height is 35 feet,
This is 40,
okay, so if it's 40, then the width of the courtyard is, the minimum is what?
the maximum is 20.
Is 20,
So
so
maximum, he's at 21, he's just over it.
so it has to be 6 feet deep and 20 feet wide to be compliant. As a courtyard, minimum.
No,
If it's a courtyard, the minimum depth is actually 12 feet. So it's kind of, if it's a courtyard, it has to be at least 12. To be excluded from the frontage build out, it needs to be set back. Whatever portion needs to be 6 feet from the primary frontage line and front facade of the building.
And the building can't have any recesses with walls on both sides.
can't.
Unless it's a courtyard, okay.
We could
Can-
take care of the facade. I think that's less of a concern, I think, yeah, I think the real setback, really the setbacks on their own. The facade with the insulation and the clay, we will get there and create a beautiful is a big word, it depends on the observer, but very nice facade that works with the surrounding. But it's very much doable with the code and with the ins and outs.
I think this is where the commission's input kind of matters with, we can start and establish a setback and whatever, either courtyards or balconies, and you can make that work. It's kind of what is desired to be part of the project, I think is the question.
All right, so that was point number,
That was 7 and 8, which had to do with the front facade and the courtyard requirements.
Do you want to allow talks on this point? Or do you want
I figure if we can just get through all Kevin's 12 points and then we can have the commissioners each take an opportunity to address the points and the project, yeah. If that makes sense, I know I'm kind of interjecting, but it's just, I figure,
yes.
I mean, I need help to follow along with these numbers, and I just want to make sure it's documented clearly like what they are, so.
Sure. Item number 9 goes back to parking. Just again, I'm just stating that I can't complete the specific parking requirements in general for the site, which kind of mirrors comment number 1. Comment number 10 is parking spaces at grade underneath a building shall be set back at least 40 feet from the primary frontage line and screened from view from adjacent streets. On the plan, actually, Emily, you're good there. The setback was actually identified based off, it's not a, this is your primary, this is your secondary street, but it's the measure of the street that you're gonna take this measurement off of. Just taking off of this side street here. Saying they're set back 41 feet, that much needs to be taken from this property line.
And they're taking from the back of the sidewalk, it looks like.
Yeah, they're taking it from, this is the side property line adjacent, this is the entry here. So it needs to be taken from the meeting house. And I think it's gonna fall apart. You know, we go to ZA two to show where the underground parking starts.
It looked, the dimension says 40 feet of the drawing.
So the 40, it's just from the front of the building, so if you add that guy, the 30 less.
The 40 is actually, the 40 is gonna be measured from here.
It has to be 40 from the building.
The primary frontage line, which is front setback.
All right.
So it'll be right here, which is gonna exclude the balconies.
The frontage line or the frontage of the
It's
building?
called the primary frontage line.
But is
It's
that,
equivalent to the front yard setback.
but it's a variable setback of 3.
Feet to
Six.
6, but it is concrete to where your building starts. But they can pull it forward or push it back to 3.6 to 9.6. But it's gonna be from that corner, not from all the way back here, which is the sidewalk, and it's not gonna be from the balcony, it's gonna be from the side where the proposed break that you see is. So obviously it's 40 feet 9 inches, you're gonna have to lose this entire.
So they're not gonna be able to fit 2 rows of parking in there then?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I had a similar comment, and again, the tentative sketch from 2022 didn't go anywhere, so we never got responses that were addressing these comments, but that was mirrored in my 2022 letter, that's the parking needs to be set back 40 feet. Nothing really came of it, it doesn't look like.
It's measured from
Getting
the
back to
building.
Yeah, getting back to your point, the original iteration, when they had that attachment, the 40 feet was on the front of the existing place house. So this, I think this might have been in conflict, but these were fine, because I think this is what, 37 feet, 40, existing price house. Right, I think the price house is just over 30, so your 40-foot line was like back here somewhere. So only like this spot, if there was one, would have been in question based on the original.
Does underground parking have to be 40 feet back?
It's actually specific to underground parking. The
Is
parking
that
spaces
true?
at grade.
Is that only in 5B or?
I think probably because only underground parking is only allowed in certain districts. Let's take a look.
Just either 5A that it's not 40 feet. You know, unless those buildings were entitled before the zoning was changed, which I don't think they were.
So this is specific to 5B. This was added in 2021, potentially as part of this. But it's specific to 5B.
So it's just in 5B.
Yep, parking spaces that grade underneath a building shall be set back at least 40 feet from the primary frontage line, similar to the front yard setback, and screened from view from adjacent streets, again, specific to 5B.
I'm sorry, it's any parking or
Underground parking.
underground?
Is it underground or under?
Underneath the building, I apologize, underneath the building.
Is there a material difference? If it's underground, does it have to be set back?
Probably, I don't know. I probably.
That doesn't
I'd have
make
to-
any sense, to be honest, but I mean,
Yeah, because the idea is to be screened from view, so if they're underground, probably not, but I'll have to think about that.
right, okay.
Again, you'll see that once you take the measurement from the primary frontage line, which is back here, you'll be less than 40 feet. I think that why would that here, those, six spots.
All right,
Bike parking is tied to a couple things. It's tied to proposed use and the number of units, the number of bedrooms. Without having those calculations, I can't, I'm sorry, those layouts, I can't perform those calculations. Just a note, again, we usually see that in a prelim or final. This kind of ties into comments number 1 and my other parking space requirements, which is number 9. And then item number 12, which is new to this review letter, is the street trees. I think that I only received these two documents when I reviewed them. I think that you maybe address these through plans that you sent Eric, or that Eric reviewed.
We just had a quick sketch of showing more trees, but it's definitely, when we get into the weeds, we would love to add as many trees as we can.
I think that's gonna be a book.
No doubt.
I think that's gonna be a book.
Yeah.
That's all I have for my letter.
Yeah, the borough engineer has a number of elements that the drawings would need to include that aren't yet there, right? Like lighting, street trees. So on. And then the sewer lines, water, letters from the utility companies, etc. All right, so if the commissioners are okay with it, what we would do is just give each commissioner a chance to address the developer. We could start with the commissioners who are on the virtual meeting option. So we would start with Todd Russi.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Hey. All right. Well, I'm glad that worked. So when I reviewed this, essentially I flagged the things that Kevin did about the setback, the measurement of it, the parking, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't have a lot to add to that because that kind of reflects my interpretation of things. Because it came up a little earlier in the meeting, I raised my hand and tried to say that actually a tentative sketch plan requirement, a submission requirement is photographs of the block where the property is located. So in enough detail to show the details of the buildings around it. So someone in the public referenced where the image is, and I would say where are the images because those are actually required at this submission stage. I generally agree with Kevin again. I understand the architecture will evolve. The word vernacular was used. Buildings with balconies like this are not in Narberth's vernacular. Buildings with vertical stone bands, like in the middle of the building, and that's not really in Narberth's vernacular. Bands usually go horizontally, not vertically. So, the pictures, it sounds like a picky thing, but the reason we ask you to submit pictures is so that we know you looked at the buildings all around. And I think I'd encourage you also to look at the apartment buildings in Narberth as well, to see how they modulate height, what kind of detailing they use, because there's no detailing in these drawings, and you say it's going to evolve. Take a good look at the buildings here. Show us the pictures. Show us what you're referencing, so that we really understand that you've studied the town. I think that would be really important, especially when you're proposing a building that is, generally not the scale of what's around it. Finally, I'm not sure what the Secretary of Interior standards say, but I do believe the HARB would have a chance to review this, and I think in terms of how the Secretary of the Interior standards deal with new construction adjacent to historic resources, I would like to make sure that this design has considered those and is telling us how the design is addressing those standards, because one of the provisions of the conditional use is that the new structure should not have a detrimental impact on the neighborhood, and it's really up to you to demonstrate that to us. Not just that it's a nice building, but that it doesn't really have a detrimental impact. And I think the way you show that is showing that you've looked at the buildings around and why this is consistent with those buildings, and that you've looked at how our standards for our historic district contemplate the addition of new buildings near historic resources. So that's what I would like to suggest.
Okay, thank you, Todd. We could go to Jennifer next.
I think like a lot of the comments that I had were hit by Kevin in his presentation, and I think that a lot of those reviews of the zoning code are going to modify the form of the building, which are going to alter, my comments on the overall design of the building. I agree that the current facade design does not really read in the same vernacular as the town, like Todd mentioned. And otherwise, I don't have anything else to add to this conversation.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Mhm.
We'll go to Ralph next.
Yeah, so I would echo the same thing in terms of including the context of nearby buildings, especially the residential property on Meeting House would be an important way of us being able to judge it properly. That's really key. I think it's unfortunate in a way. I would gladly trade this the side yard setback for what is considered the backyard setback. That would make the plan a lot better and put me on record for that one. But I would rather have a larger setback against the residential property. The back of the property faces a parking lot, you know, and it doesn't seem to be meaningful there. So that's my take on it. But you know, as an architect, usually you start with a buildable area plan, which would account for all the setbacks. And I know the zoning here is a little bit arcane. I get that, but you know, you have to probably start again and say, this is the buildable area plan. It includes the setback, the parking requirements, et cetera, and it will. Honestly, I think it's going to tell you that you can't build this big a building on this lot. That's end of story. You can build something there, but it's probably not this big, and it's not going to have this many units. That's just the nature of this lot, and I think that's what you're going to find. So I think once you do that exercise, though, then you'll have a proper story to tell the developer, saying like, this is actually what's allowable. This is how many square feet you can get in that building, and you can slice and dice the apartments how you like, and that's what you're going to end up with. But I don't think it's going to be this much in the way of flavor. So that's just my interpretation of what we're seeing from, you know, coming out of the zoning interpretation. So yeah, that's my comments there.
Thank you, Ralph. Heidi?
Yeah, I would say a lot of what Ralph has said, but also, I mean, when I first saw the building, I said, oh my gosh, that's way too big for the site. And I'm very uncomfortable with how close it is to the Price House. As much as you say you respect the historic building, I have to disagree that you really are not respecting the historic building. It's probably the finest building, not just in Narberth, but in our general area. It's very highly regarded. The additions on the back of the building are actually not new enough to not be considered for keeping them. I have a postcard that shows that one of those structures is from before 1889. So we can't just take that off. I mean, Harb's going to have to review this. The building is way too big. So, you know, I understand about viability and buildability and whether this can actually be developed. But that's just the way it is. I mean, it's too big for the neighborhood. That's a nice street, and everyone has. I mean, that was my first thought too. It's what about the house next door? Why don't we ever see what the street looks like in context? Because it's really critical to not turn down that street and the neighborhood. You know, to just put such a big structure in this very nice neighborhood. Just it doesn't meet the requirements of our comprehensive code. I don't know what it does as far as other elements of our saldo or anything else, but it's not in the right language for Narberth. If it was on Montgomery Avenue, it might be different. If it wasn't next to a beautiful historical house, it might be different. But it's really got to be toned down.
Thank you, Heidi. Aaron?
Oh, David.
David, or what did I say? Okay, yeah.
I mean, say close enough.
Aaron is absent today, yeah. So you're
We
taking
look
Aaron's
a lot
place.
So, well, Heidi, Ralph, and Todd and Jen said, concerns about The scale, kind of this doesn't front Montgomery Avenue, it's kind of, it's technically part of a parcel that fronts that, but it's kind of more in the neighborhood, it's awfully, and it's really right up against that, those homes just to the west of it there, and, yeah, I'm anxious to see what the Harb will say about this. I didn't like to mention that little addition, I guess, really except it is an addition, because it is also appears to be historic. I thought there was like a little garage there
It's not.
that's not, but then that little one-story one, that I would be concerned about, just the arbitrary, or the seemingly arbitrary, just demolition of that based on, I mean, again, the Harp will obviously comment on that as well, but, yeah, and this is, design-wise, I certainly can't say that nothing would work here, but this certainly is not in line with what we've really seen in terms of the new multifamily aesthetic in the product. So that was, yeah, my main concerns.
David, just because you're on that side of it, are you a commissioner as well?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
I'm just kind of spread out a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's no formal seating chart. All right, Emily, would you be able to share a screen, if you just Google Price House and click on the link to narberthhistory.org, there's some vintage photographs of the building. It's just useful for us to illustrate the discussion.
Let me pull it up and then I'll share.
Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, because I think that, so the Price House is, I think built in like 1803, according to the narberthhistory.org site. It is one of the oldest buildings in the area. And it was, it's a pretty charming house, especially in its day. I asked earlier if this proposal had to go to the Historic Architectural Review Board, the HARB, and I'm not sure I got an answer, and I'm concerned that it might bypass the HARB. But since it's proposed to alter the historic structure, it seems to me it should go to the HARB, and there should be a very careful discussion around that. But my recollection was that the part of the rear structure was like a kitchen or something that was original to the house.
So I'm going to flip over to my Harb member hat real quick.
Okay.
And we did originally talk about kind of the Harb, maybe this way back in the day, kind of right when the Harb first started. This is straight, I don't want to do historic, I know this is plan commission. But ultimately, based on the site plan, I would make a determination based on your lot layers and public rights of way if it needs to go to HARB. I'm just going to read the section that says whether it needs to go to HARB or not. The property owner must obtain a certificate of appropriateness, which is the formal public larger HARB. If a contributing resource is proposed to be demolished, which it is, which is that back portion, and such alteration or demolition is visible from a public way, you can say it's visible from maybe Montgomery, but definitely Meeting House. But it also has to be within the first or second lot layer. It's not. It's in the third lot layer. To me, and I would be the one making that choice, I don't think it needs to go to HARB. Happy to have a discussion about it.
Yeah, so I mean, look, that's your, and that may be technically correct. I think it's sort of, so that's the technical correct answer, perhaps.
Happy to have it.
Yeah, and then it is what it is, and then it seems like it ought to go to the HARB, but it may not be required to. So I don't want people to assume that it's required to if it's technically not. It's not on any agenda for the HARB at the moment. So, anyways, that's part one. It's like, why is this house important? I think the zoning was actually modified with the intention of creating more use for this large parcel than just this one historic house, in order to provide an economic way of keeping the building, I guess, and having economic use of the lot. So, but with that said, I think that clearly a lot of effort went into the presentation to develop the conceptual massing plan and architecture, but there were a number of non-compliant issues walked through tonight. So what I heard was, the parking is supposed to be 40 feet back from the lot line. Whether or not that maybe makes sense is that's what the zoning requires, the way that it's being measured. And it requires a 25-foot rear setback. Again, the way it's being presented, that would be 25 feet from the lot line opposite of Meeting House Lane. And so it's only got a 5-foot setback at its closest point. So those two items don't comply. There was extensive discussion around how to compose the front facade to meet the building frontage line setbacks, and that seems quite complicated, although there's probably a way to do it. And then I think the intent of the zoning was to create a buffer of 25 feet actually from the Montgomery Avenue properties to the residential neighborhoods behind. So again, the way it is technically analyzed, it leads to certain dimensional lot line setback lines. I think that whoever wrote the zoning was intending that the 25 feet be a minimum separation from the lot line adjacent to single family houses. So I'm just pointing out that's what was intended to accomplish. And so ultimately all of those zoning requirements would dictate the amount of what you can build. And then the design of the parking dictates how much program the site can carry as well. So if you can't provide enough parking for the residential or the commercial, then you have to reduce it to the size that the parking lot can support. So I hope this has been useful in exploring some of the challenges with developing this site and some of the things that would be necessary to change before this could be considered a compliant proposal, because it's not at the moment. Do we say anything? And I think there was some discussion about all the other elements of planning which would come potentially after the sketch plan, but things like street plans and so on. And then there were some missing elements we heard tonight about photographs. What I usually do is I also check Google Street View while I'm listening to sort of see what the context of the block is, but those photographs are whenever Google took them. So the applicant, we asked them to take pictures of the adjacent streetscape so that people can see how the building would fit into that streetscape. So if are there any questions back to the commissioners from the applicant?
No, I'll just, say that the focus of this plan was in large part to do our best to conform to the zoning code. And you can see that we didn't succeed in that because the code is, in my humble opinion, extremely confusing here. But that focus is really the reason for a lack of some of the detail, including the photographs, the items that Kevin mentioned. It's not for lack of interest in those items or that we think they're not important. It's just that trying to meet the zoning code is a real labyrinth here, and that's really where, at least on my end, my role on this team, that's where I saw my energy and a lot of the team's energy go the last couple of months. So a lot to do.
I mean, is it required to be an apartment building? Is that the goal, is to make it a rentable unit?
That is what this developer who Michael has engaged does. Now, I think that that's a conditional use here. So, wearing my lawyer hat, I would say that's a use that the borough has entertained and to some degree blessed. To be honest, I'm not familiar enough with the code to know what else.
Well, and I'm obviously not in the business of development, so I don't know what's viable or not as far as using the.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to make one comment. I'm sorry because I cannot listen to everyone, and I'm sorry that I'm not with you in the room. Basically, so I live in Barakinwood, really like 5 minutes away, and I have 4 kids, and I just want to, because I understand that as a commission, you kind of try to understand what is the business of a multifamily. That's what you said before. and how this business is going. And I'm a developer, so I built few hundreds of units in Philadelphia. And as a father of 4 kids, one of the problems that I have in Barkinwood is to try to keep my daughters around because it's extremely expensive today. I have one medical student and one dentist student, and very, very expensive. So they have to go either in the city or in a different location where it's way cheaper. Today, if you look at the rental market or even the condo market in your neighborhood, not only Narbeth, I would say Narbeth and Lower Merion, it's extremely expensive. It's skyrocketing to like 3,000, 4,000, sometimes $5,000 for a 2 bedroom. So to build a small, tiny, beautiful building of like 7, 8 apartments, it's doable, but with the way today the cost of material and cost of labor and everything and the engineering and the architect and the lawyers, those rents are going to be extremely, extremely high. And I don't know if this is if you want to bring young or attract some young population to Narbeth, a couple with one kid, graduate student, that won't be the case. The only way to have a viable for the developer and for the potential tenant is to building is to have a certain amount of units. And that's what we try to maximize within the code. And again, this is our understanding, and we understand that there's some misunderstanding. That the minimum we can do to make this project viable, if we want to have multifamily and have something nice that will cost some, but still will be viable and will be kind of affordable for a specific tenant. That's my only comment. It doesn't have to do anything with the zoning code and, of course, all the requirements that have to be met. There's no question about it.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments from that perspective. There's maybe some tension between different elements. If all the commissioners are done speaking, and if there are no further questions for the commissioners, then
Adam, I have my hand raised, Adam.
I'm sorry, I can't see your hand. Sorry, Todd. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I think Nate, we all understand what you're saying, but I don't think we think that the maximum possible build out is appropriate in every area of Narberth. I mean, there are areas of Narberth where we are very interested in encouraging the kind of density you're talking about, but other areas not so much. So I was actually going to say though, Adam, I would like to suggest perhaps that number one, we often make small adjustments to the zoning code when we find there are things that don't make sense or are problematic in a kind of arbitrary way. And so I think that, one thing I could suggest we do and report back next month is to see whether there's a way to change the setbacks so that there's always a 25-foot setback in the 5B zone when it abuts the neighborhood properties, so that we avoid the problem that Ralph is pointing out. Because that is the intent. The intent is to create buffering to the houses in the adjacent district, right? Ralph is right that 25 feet next to a parking lot is not sensible, and we could probably fix that pretty quickly. There may be other little changes suggested too that we could all agree on that would make sense. And we've routinely done this, so I don't see why, if there are things like this that come up, we might propose it to council and we see some small fixes here. But also on the other side of the coin, I was not aware of what Kevin said about the HARB. I didn't factor in the third lot layer rule, which I know is correct. And I would also like to propose that we recommend the council that if this does come forward as a preliminary application, that it does involve the demolition of a resource even though the current ordinance doesn't require it, since it is a conditional use, and one of the conditions of the conditional use is to demonstrate that there's no negative impact on the neighborhood and the community, that that particular proposal should be reviewed by the HARB in order to support that aspect of the conditional use requirements.
Okay, I'm just gonna state that back. You're suggesting that if we would advise council that our recommendation as the planning commission is that in demolishing a portion of the Price House, that the applicant go before the HARB to discuss that as part of the conditional use process for if they have a conditional use.
Correct. And the rationale is one of the conditions is the applicant has to demonstrate there's not a negative impact on the neighborhood and the surroundings. And one way to do that would be to go and get the HARB's review of the proposed designs and the relationship of the new building to the Price House. I know that's an extra hurdle, but that would help, I think, probably ease a lot of minds.
Does anyone disagree with that recommendation?
Also, the 25-foot setback location.
Yeah, that's, well, the first point you made was that so it seems like the commission agrees that that would be a recommendation for the conditional use process. And then the other point you suggested was would the commission be open to recommending a modification of the zoning to essentially clarify that the 25-foot setback is adjacent to single family residential.
To the adjacent residential district, whatever, it could be a twin, it could be
Yeah, to the lower zoning district.
Correct, to the lower zoning district, correct, yes.
And basically the intent would be to have the smaller setback, as Ralph said, face the commercial parking lot, and the larger
Correct.
setback face the residential.
Correct.
So does anyone disagree with that? All right, and that does seem like it is the complexity with governing multiple buildings on one lot and multiple streets on a corner is what's driving this discussion of where the setbacks are. And so that maybe,
Right.
We talked through that extensively, but that might be, there could be discussion about changing the rules to improve them, essentially, how they
Correct.
apply to the adjacency to other zones.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other commissioners? All right, so it sounds like the commission agrees with Todd's points. Then I think if there's no further, what we would do is open it for public comment on anything, but presumably on this application would be the most relevant public comment. And I'm not necessarily going to use a stopwatch. We normally would have 3 minutes per person. But just so if people just keep in mind the time budget for the evening, if there's anyone that wants to speak. And yes, if you could introduce yourself, your name and your, I guess, address.
Okay. My name is Sue Swift. I live on Meeting House Lane, pretty much right across the street from where the building would be built. What you were just saying about the space between the adjacent buildings, are you saying you would want to make it a bigger space in relation to residential?
That was, yes, that's what we were suggesting.
You won't want to make it smaller?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and I'm very happy that you guys think it's too big, because obviously I'm sure you can predict that the people on our street think it's too big. And how important is the people on the street, our feedback? How important is our feedback?
It's important. I'm only speaking for myself, and an applicant is allowed to build whatever the zoning code allows by right, and so people's opinions wouldn't necessarily be able to control that, but there's hopefully a respectful process where people the community's voice can be heard by a developer applicant to try to create as much harmony as possible. And then if there were if the applicant were asking for something to be changed, because the developers legally, I think, can go to council with a zoning proposed change and council would consider it, presumably the elected body would be interested in what the constituents have to say, for example. So it's taken very seriously. I'm just saying that the law covers what they're allowed to do.
So if the applicant were to go to the council and say, we want to change the zoning,
They can't unless council would change like we take an act of council to change zoning.
Right.
However, they can go to the zoning hearing board and request relief from zoning. And that could be granted. That has nothing to do with our process. It's a totally different board. So we don't really comment on that, but they can request to build something that the zoning would not allow because of a hardship, it would be called, to say like that because of the special conditions of this property, therefore the zoning should not apply. But that wouldn't come to us.
well, and I know that property probably might fit that criteria, because we were involved in it when he bought the building, they changed the zoning after he bought it.
Well, that isn't a hardship per se, but it would be
It
things like,
sounded like it was sort of, to me, it sounded like you guys were saying that it was a hardship for him when the last time we were involved. I'm just saying, maybe now you're not really, that was a few years ago. It sounded like, people were trying to accommodate him because he kind of got like, screwed, for lack of a better word, because he bought the property before it was, before the Marvin Borough.
or the historic preservation ordinance.
Yeah. So anyway, and there's other questions. So like, does any space get left open? Is there any requirement to have like some open space will stay there? Or they can just pretty much.
So open space.
Like, do you have to have open space like for
So with the zoning,
20 units?
again, my understanding is that with the zoning, you can only cover with the building a percentage of the lot, and it varies by zone, and Kevin could speak to what the percentage that you can build on of this lot is.
Like, like is there a limit on how many people can live in that limited amount of space? It seems like a lot of people to be.
So zoning is a little, as we've all realized, kind of complicated. So from a building standpoint, an apartment building in the 5B district can occupy 80% of the lot. It's a lot. That's the building. Impervious is then your building plus driveways, walkways, decks, patios. That's 90%. The bigger the building, the more units, the more parking spaces you need. So like they all, there's more like parks and recreational space that's required for our SALDO ordinance, fees that are associated with that, green space associated with that. So they all kind of piggyback off of each other, but like from a strictly building size, 80% is allowed for the lot. They're way under that. I know it seems huge, but like they're way under that. And impervious is 90% for the 5B district. So that's what zoning regulates.
And the reason for this is that the Price House is a little bit unique, right? It's a 1800s residential house that originally had grounds around it and still does have a front yard to a degree. But it's surrounded by, there are some other residences on Montgomery Avenue, but there's a lot of commercial buildings. So it's zoned essentially as a commercial zone, and it's next to a gas station, former service station. So that's why the zoning is what it is.
I know, but again, which is really unfortunate because Meeting House Lane is not a commercial, it's a residential street, and that's very unfortunate.
And that's what that 25-foot buffer in the zone was supposed to accomplish, was that, because that's essentially, so.
That would be really helpful.
Um,
So it doesn't matter how, you could put a bunch of, you could jam as many people as you want into these apartments, there's no limit on that.
Well, the way the zoning works is there's a height limit, there's the setback requirements, and there's minimum parking requirements. So you can't put more apartments than you have parking, for example.
It's based on how many people would be able to fit in the apartment, right? Is that what you were saying? You guys.
How many bedrooms?
You did say that.
How many units?
It kind of starts from the size of the building. The size of your building has requirements, kind of the shape and location of the building is pre-designed by our zoning code. I don't want to simplify it, but then based on that, you have to say, okay, this fits X amount of units. Well, if I have this amount of units, I need this number of parking spaces. Whether that works or not is up to the design of the building. So they kind of just level with each other.
My 3 minutes is probably up, actually.
Well, but you're sort of also maybe unofficially representing your neighbors. You can take this information back to your neighbors and so on. So
One of my neighbors is on.
There's a Liz.
So there's a hand up online.
What does conditional use mean?
It's an additional layer of review that is performed by council. It's essentially another hearing similar to this where the design is proposed to council. And there's, if you want to look up at the zoning code, there are actual stipulations for what you need to provide and what criteria you need to meet to be granted a conditional use by council. So that'll be a whole,
Change the zoning.
no, to just get this conditional use approval. It's essentially like getting an approval, just think of it that way. But there's criteria that the applicants need to meet
Yes,
for the
my
design.
audio wasn't on.
Characters of the building, how it works with the development, how it works with the neighborhood, architecturally, how that all works. You can find those requirements in the zoning code. It'll be a whole other meeting, just like this, just for council.
Liz Hanson.
Hi, Hassan. Hi. So I live at 341 Meeting House. So I'm basically 2 houses away from where that building would be. And, I feel really frustrated because there's a lot of discussion about affordable housing. We need to make affordable housing. Well, there's a lot of us that bought homes in, a family neighborhood and can't afford to move out if you overbuild and crowd us. And there's no consideration taken to that. We just all put up with that huge, ugly building across the street that changed the character of our street. Not to mention there was so much noise for the construction that went on forever, trucks and everything else. It was Albrecht's before. And now it's a totally different look and feel on our street. And now you basically want to double that. Like, it's one thing if you wanted to put in a few small townhouses, but I don't know how you think squeezing a building next to a historic building so close to houses isn't going to totally ruin the feeling of the street. And I feel like there's a lot of other areas that are protected in Narberth. And our street is being like overbuilt. And I just don't think it makes sense to have an apartment building there. We have a huge one across the street. If you want to put in a few townhouses, that's different. But I just don't think it's fair to the residents of Meeting House Lane.
And we all agree with everybody on Meeting House Lane.
Thank you. For the commissioner's benefit too, with regards to the suggestion around townhouses, I'm not sure that the zoning allows townhouses. It does not. And this is another example where I kind of personally think that the zoning needs to be modified to allow townhouses. And we don't need to get into it tonight. There's like some technical approaches that need to change to how we regulate development of town, like what we call townhouses, right, or row houses. Because right now the sort of zoning code assumes that each one comes on a little townhouse lot, so it becomes a subdivision into townhouses, and it's not a modern way to do a townhouse development. Just it seems to me that the suggestion of townhouses would be something that would be more compatible with the size of this property and its context and its parking requirements. It's your proposal, you're the applicant, it's your property and so on. But it does, and so I'm not assuming that that's what you want to do or that it's economically feasible. Simply from an architectural massing and community planning perspective, it does seem like it would be a viable use, but we might have to also modify the zoning to make that allowable, I guess.
I was just going to say, if there's anything we can do to support that, I know all the residents of Meeting House Lane would be happy to do that. It would be much better.
And then we've got Rite Aid across, that's something's gonna be happening there. We're just inundated with, we're not a commercial street, but we're being treated, I think we're the only street in Narberth that is affected like this because of Montgomery Avenue.
Okay, are there any other public comments?
Looks like that someone else has their hand raised.
Kimberly,
Thank you. So I'm at 348 Meeting House Lane. So I'm directly next to all of this and across from all of this. And so I agree with everything that's being said by my neighbors. The construction was horrible when this was being built and honestly disrespectful to us. Multiple mornings I had to call and report them starting before 7 o'clock in the morning. And I just don't want to I don't feel that we should have to deal with that again. Additionally, I'm concerned with the parking situation as is. Even having just refugee across the street, they park their cars all day long in front of our house and across the street and never get tickets, yet I'm forced to pay for my parking. So it's been a little bit frustrating to say the least.
because it's a permitted block, you're saying, and people are parking without permits, or is that what you're saying, or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually got ticketed because I was like, if they're going to keep staying on our street, I'm just not going to pay for my parking. And of course, we got a ticket, but they never do. So it's very frustrating to have to pay to park on your own street and then see people park there day in and day out and take up all the space. And it's just constant around the clock people coming and going. And as has been said, it's a residential street. Like these are our houses. They've been here for years. We should be treated like a neighborhood, not like a development.
Okay, are there any other public comments? Okay, so I think if there's no more public comments, I think we've covered everything. Thank you everyone for your time. And we'll close this agenda item. And that is all we have for this meeting. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn if that's the will of the commission.
Motion to adjourn. Phone in.
Okay, Todd, Rusty motions to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Ralph, second. Okay, commissioners in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
No, anyone opposed? All right, we are stand adjourned. Thank you very much.